Hi all, welcome to Geneso IT Trainings. My name is Sagar. In this video, we'll be looking at one of the most important Linux file permissions concept, which is umask. Before I do that, I would request everybody to subscribe my channel. Thank you. So let us understand what this umask is all about. Umask is user file creation mode, and which is going to help us to determine the file permissions for newly created files. So by this statement itself, you should actually be wondering, how come whenever we are trying to create a file or a directory inside the Linux server, and these files and directories will have a default file permissions that are going to be set. So what do I mean by that? So let me open my Linux server and we'll try to understand it. So let's look at ls-l and we will try to understand we do not have any files or directories available. There is one directory called as snap. So let's not make use of this. Let us create our own directory, mkdir. So let's look into this, dir1. I'm creating a directory 1, ls-l. So you should be actually wondering, the moment we create this directory called as directory 1, how come these file permissions are being set? And what is making this particular file permissions to be set? So why not we are not able to set a different file permissions? So what is actually happening behind it? So in order to understand that, you need to have an understanding of umask value. So let me open my slide back. So that's what I said. Umask determines the file permissions for newly created files. So whenever I created a directory, there is a file permissions that are going to be set. So how come these file permissions we are going to get it? It all depends on the umask value of this particular user that we are trying to make use of it. So you need to understand some of the statements that are available here. So look at this. Default file permission values for folders are 777. So it means for the directories, folders or directories, the default file permission values are 777. And the default file permission values for files are 666. So let us create a file now. Let us try to create a file here. So in order to create a file, we'll be making use of the command called as touch and file1 and ls-l. So look at this. The moment I create a file, file1, I have a default file permissions that are going to be set in this format. So who is deciding this to set the file permissions for this file1 in this specific format? So umask value is going to decide to set the file permissions in this specific format. And we need to have an idea about, we need to have an understanding, the default file permission values for files are 666. And look at this statement, umask default value. So by this time you should be able to understand umask is nothing but a specific value. Umask has a specific value. Umask default value for root user is 022 and umask default value for non-root user is 002. And let's open the server, and here we are trying to work as a root user. So let me check my umask value, umask. Simply type the command umask and press enter. The moment you do it, you'll be getting the default value of 022. And there is one 0 available that is being appearing here. It's a different concept. Again, it's a sticky bit concept, which I'll be talking about in my later videos. But we will try to make use of only these three characters, which is 022. So that's what it is being specified here. The umask default value for root user is 022. And with the help of this umask value, we will try to assess how come we are getting only these set of permissions, why not a different set of permissions. Let me clear the screen. Let me type ls-l and let us try to understand what is the umask value here. So the umask value is 022. Let me open my snippet and let me copy it. Okay, I'll put it in the paint so that we'll have a good explanation and understanding of what exactly we are trying to do it. So this is what, look at this. We have ls-l command. The moment we type this command, we have a specific directory and a file that is being available. And by default, there are specific file permissions that are going to be set. So we have read write and read and read. How come these values, these permissions are going to be set? Why not other values? So as I said again, umask is something which will determine the Linux file permissions for the newly created files. Umask is the value. So you need to understand the umask value is nothing but 022. This is the umask value 0, 2, 2. And I said that by default, see, let's look into this slide. So the default file permissions for the folders or directories are the default file permissions for the directories or any folders. So whenever we are trying to create a directory or a folder, the default file permissions for this directory or a folder is nothing but 777. And now you need to understand what is the umask value. The umask value is nothing but 0, 2, 2. See, look at this. The umask value is going to be 0, 2, 2. And if you subtract this umask value from the default directory permissions of 777, and you are going to get the output as 5. See, I'm trying to subtract, that's it. 777 is the default directory permissions, and my umask value is 0, 2, 2. If I subtract it, 7 minus 2 is 5, 7 minus 2 is 5, and 7 minus 0 is nothing but 7. So what we are able to see here, so this is what the value we are going to get it. And you need to understand the first 7 represents the user or owner, and the second 5 represents the group, and the third 5 represents the others. So this is how the default file permissions are being set. And you all know it very well. Whenever you see this value of 7, it is nothing but complete read, write and execute. And whenever you see this value of 5, which is nothing but read hyphen and x, because read stands for 4, the value of read is 4, and the value of x is 1, and the value of read here is 4, and the write is 2, and the x is going to be 1. So together it sums up to 7. And finally you have this 5 stands for again read hyphen x. So read and only execute permissions we are going to set it up. So this is how, these are the file permissions we are going to set for a specific directory or a folder the moment we create it. Whenever we create a new directory or a folder, these are the file permissions that are going to set. It all depends on the umask value. So look at this. For the directory 1 that we created it right now, we have rwx, which is nothing but for the user and the owner, and r-x, which is going to be for the group, and r-x, which is going to be for the other users. So let us try to understand. So you need to understand one thing. For the directories and the folders, the default file permissions are going to be 777. So that is the reason for this particular directory 1, we are getting the file permissions as read, write, execute, only read and execute, and only read and execute here. So it all depends on the umask value that we are going to have it. So let me show you the same example. Let me clear the screen. Okay. And let me show you the same example for the files. We have just created a file now. We have just created a file called as file1. And this file1 is set with a specific file permissions like this. How come these file permissions are we going to get it? How come these are the file permissions we are going to get it? One thing you need to understand, the umask value here is nothing but it's 0, 2, 2. Whenever you look into, whenever we try to create this particular file, you need to understand this file will definitely have, this particular file called as file1 will have a default file permissions as, the files will have a default file permissions as 666. And based on this default file permissions, we will be considering this umask value, and we subtract the umask value from the default Linux file permissions, and for the file it is 666 minus 0, 2, 2. Whenever we subtract this, what is going to get, what is output we are going to get it? 6 minus 2 is going to be 4, 6 minus 2 is going to be 4, and 6 minus 0 is going to be 6 itself. And you need to understand this 6 is for the, this 6 is for the user or the owner, and the 4 is going to be for the group, and this is going to be for the other users. So whenever you look into now the file that we created here, and this is going to get the file permissions for the user or the owner as 6. And we all know it very well. The moment we see 6, it is nothing but read has got 4 and write has got 2. Read has got 4 and write is going to get 2 value. 4 and 2 value, which is adding up to 6 and hyphen. That's what the file permissions, we have it here right away. Look at this. read, write, execute for the owner. And for the group, we have only 4. Whenever we see the value of 4, it is nothing but read permissions only. And whenever we see the value of 4, it is nothing but read permissions only. So we do not have write and execute permissions. We do not have write and execute permissions. See, look at this. Read hyphen hyphen. That's what we are going to get the default file permissions. And you need to understand these file permissions are being set based on the umask value. And in this process, you need to understand the Linux file permissions default value for a directory or a folder is nothing but 777, and when it comes to the files, it is nothing but 666. Whenever we have the umask value, whenever we are trying to create a directory, we subtract the umask value from this 777 022, and here we'll be subtracting 022 for the files, and whatever the output we are going to get it based on that value, based on that numerical value. Here we are going to get 755, and here we are going to get 644. Based on this numerical value, every file is going to be decided their Linux file permissions. Based on this value, the directory is going to be decided its sorry guys, Linux file permissions. So this is the importance of umask value, and you should really understand why we are able to have only these Linux file permissions for this specific directory and the file. And if we want if you want, you can definitely change the umask value also. In order to change the umask value, simply type umask and give a space 011 and press enter. Look at the umask value. So we have just changed the umask value to 011. So whenever we try to create a file now, and the new file permissions are going to be set based on this umask value, it means that whenever we are trying to create a directory, it is going to get subtracted. 777 is going to get subtracted from 011, and whenever we are trying to create a file, 666, this is a default Linux file permissions for a file creation. So 666 subtracted with 011. So accordingly, the Linux file permissions are going to be set for the newly created files. And one more important thing, if I become as a root user, the default umask value is going to be 0022. So let me change this umask value again, 022. So this is my umask value, default value for the root user. And let me become a Ubuntu user. Whenever I become a Ubuntu user, see, look at this. What is the umask value? The default umask value is going to be 002. And whenever we create a file or a directory based on the Ubuntu user, now the file and a directory will get a file permissions based on this umask value, which is getting subtracted from whenever we are creating a directory from 777, and whenever we are creating a file from 666, it gets subtracted. 002 gets subtracted, and whatever the value we are going to get it, based on that value we are going to create a based on that value, the Linux file permissions are going to be set for the file. So let us try to understand this as well. So let me clear the screen once again. So what we will do is, let us look into ls-l. Let us create a new file called as touch file 3000. That's what 300 or 300. We'll try to create a file called as touch file 300. So let me look at only that particular file, ls-l, and I'll grep and file 300. And what are the Linux file permissions that are going to be set here? See, look at this. The Linux file permissions that that are going to be set here are nothing but read write, and read. How come these are the Linux file permissions that are going to be set for this file 300? It all depends on the umask value. Look at the umask value. It's nothing but 022. It's nothing but, 002. I'll take the snippet of it. Let me take the snippet of it. I'll copy it. Let me open the paint and paste it here. Let me take this, let me show you how it is going to be created. So the default Linux file permissions value is going to be, for a file, the file permissions are going to be 666. These are the default permissions, 666, which is going to be subtracted with 002. And whenever we subtract it, the answer is going to be 466. The moment, see, this is the value, this is the numerical value that is going to be provided at the time of creation of a file 300. Whenever we are trying to create the file 300, based on this 664, the Linux file permissions are going to be set. And the moment we see 6, you all know it very well, this is for the user or the owner, and you need to understand this 6 is nothing but it stands for read and write and no executable permissions. Read stands for 4 and write stands for 2, which sums up to 6. And this 6 is for the group, and you all know it very well that 6 is nothing but read, write and hyphen, which is no executable permissions. Read stands for 4, write stands for 2, which sums up to 6. And the 4 is nothing but for the other users. And the value is going to be 4 is nothing but read hyphen hyphen, read stands for 4 value. And we don't have the write permissions, we don't have the executable permissions. So these are the permissions that are going to be set at the time of creation of the file. Read write and only read permissions. So this is the most important usage of UMask, and this is how by default whenever we try to create a file, a specific Linux file permissions are going to be set. File permissions are going to be set for a file or a directory. It all depends on the UMask value at the time of creation of a file. That's why we say UMask determines the file permissions for newly created files. So that's all this video is all about. This is about the most important understanding of one of the most important concepts in Linux file permissions, UMask. I hope I made this video clear. I made this concept clear to you, and I'm really thankful for watching this video, and I would request everybody to subscribe my channel. Thank you.